Did you know that? Stress is really responsible for over 90% of our illnesses. The point of view of epigenetics and quantum mechanics. According to the World Health Organization, stress appears in a person whose personal resources and management strategies are exceeded by the demands placed on him. There is also a difference between stress, anxiety, and anguish. Stress is normal in the presence of danger, but it becomes harmful as soon as it lasts. It is a physiological response to demands on the body. Anxiety is a tendency to create stress yourself, to amplify it, or to anticipate it. The risk is that it will turn into a pathological condition. It can be the result of prolonged stress, where the person begins to fear any unexpected situation. Post-traumatic stress is an example. Anguish manifests itself in the form of occasional and repeated attacks. It denotes a physical and psychic discomfort, often due to an environment of stress and anxiety. Stress is known as routine pressure, at work, at school, in the family, or for any other responsibility. Stress caused by sudden and unforeseen change, such as divorce, a change of work, or the appearance of an illness, a traumatic episode, a natural disaster, an attack, etc. The main sources of stress are divided into 5 categories: work, financial worries, family, lack of time, and personal and other problems. After bereavement and job loss, the move is, according to several studies, the most stressful event in life. Psychologists say that moving is an event that can in many cases lead to depression. Whether it is voluntary or not, many people experience anxiety when changing their address. Leaving one's home is a mourning. Memories, neighbors, habits, everything is upset. Making your boxes, deciding whether to keep your old items or keep them, even if they haven't been used for years. This represents big decisions. Physiologically, a stressful situation leads to the release of hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, which increase blood pressure and accelerate heart rate and disrupt certain circadian rhythms or biological processes that have an oscillation of about 24 hours. These physiological factors have led to the hypothesis of an association between the level of stress and the increased risk of cancer. Stress has immediate effects on the endocrine system of all organs and tissues that secrete hormones. During the stress phase, cortisol increases, and with it increases the level of glucose in the blood. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid hormone produced and released by the adrenal glands, which is made to fluctuate. It is an adaptive hormone that allows us to cope with the difficulties of life. However, its chronic use has adverse health consequences. Scientifically, in case of chronic stress or burnout, the cortisol remains high, it no longer decreases, which is completely harmful to the body. Stress, as we have seen, is a biological mechanism used to ensure our survival. Imagine the prehistoric man walking quietly through the jungle, and out of nowhere, a saber-toothed tiger emerges. The cerebral tonsil of our prehistoric man, a small organ the size of an almond lodged within our brain, activates. The cerebral amygdala is part of the limbic system and is involved in the recognition and evaluation of the emotional valence of sensory stimuli, in associative learning, and in associated behavioral and vegetative responses, especially in fear and anxiety. The limbic system is the set of brain structures located in the middle and deep region of the brain, playing a major role in memory and emotions, as well as in the development of behaviors. So in a saber-toothed tiger, the cerebral amygdala of our prehistoric man above would emerge out of nowhere. It would function as a warning system. Being a wake-up call, the body's direct reaction is either to attack, to flee, or to remain frozen or tetanized. In the same way that if you touch a burning surface, you will have the reflex to remove your hand before you even understand what was happening. The good news is, if you run into a dangerous animal, your reflex can save your life. The bad news is that these are the same reactions that occur in your daily life, in front of your daily stressful situations. So with your boss, your half, your children, your neighbors, your pocket empty of money, etc. Stress hormones extinguish body functions that are not necessary to save the energy needed to fight the predator, or flee danger, or even remain paralyzed by fear. There are organs in the body that are not going to function properly because they are not getting the energy to function and are starting to develop either cancers or other health impairments. As noted above, there are always 3 possible reactions. attack, flight, or remain tetanized. In the face of an event, the cerebral amygdala activates. Clearly, when something happens, the brain launches an instinctive reaction before it has even identified the situation. Again, it's a survival mechanism. Once the brain has found in memory an appropriate response, or at least one already known response, the famous cerebral amygdala can calm down. For children, adult intervention is often necessary to relieve stress. When the cerebral tonsil is activated, the body begins to prepare to react and secretes cortisol and adrenaline. There are three main types of reactions. The attack. In the case of the prehistoric man facing his saber-toothed tiger, his predator, it would be to engage in battle. Of course, if our friend is armed, why not? In our current life, the attack is quite present as a reaction. Shouting, typing, throwing objects. It is also the healthiest response for our body because it allows to externalize and discharge stress hormones. And yes, when your child screams, types, rolls on the floor because he is stressed, it's a good thing for him. Sure, it's not great for others. The good news is, you can teach him how to release his tensions otherwise, by making him move and jump. The important thing is that he physically discharges his tension. Some reactions are less impressive, but are also part of the attack mechanisms. Mock, judge others, insult, hurt yourself, slam doors, etc. You guessed it, the escape reaction is to run away. Yes, for the prehistoric man that's right. And it's certainly a life-saving option. In his case, he would have time to discharge his stress hormones, thanks to his frantic race to a shelter. Unfortunately for us, in our daily lives, flight manifests itself in various less physical ways. Isolating, sulking, hiding, procrastinating, ruminating. But also a whole bunch of behaviors that allow us to cut ourselves off from our sensations and divert our attention to something else. Drinking alcohol, smoking, biting our nails, focusing on our smartphone, etc. These reactions do not allow us to fully discharge stress hormones. And I would particularly emphasize a reaction that is causing a lot of misunderstandings. Smiling and laughing can also be leak-type answers. When you yell at your son and he looks at you with a smile, or even starts laughing stupidly, it's stress. It is important to understand this because, as I said earlier, it is a reflex. He does not do it to make fun of you. This is not insolence. He is under stress. He does not control his reaction. So the more you scream, the more stress he gets, the more his reaction increases. The only effective solution is to calm this little world, starting with you. Breathe, drink a glass of water, take some air. Freeze or remain tetanized. When you're scared and on top of that you feel powerless, you freeze. This is the third stress reaction. This is the most dangerous for the body because cortisol and adrenaline are not eliminated at all and accumulate. The cerebral tonsil is suffering and becoming more and more sensitive. How does this freeze manifest? You see the mouse being surprised by a cat. All of a sudden, it stops and becomes very soft. It's the thanatosis, it makes the dead. If we take our caveman back, his stress is such that his muscles relax, his metabolic functions slow down. The body is frozen, unable to move. It no longer moves in the hope that the predator does not notice it or considers it uninteresting. It's a bit of a last chance technique. I can't do anything, so I cut myself off. In our civilized life, what does it look like? The body becomes all soft. The muscles relax completely. We lose all our means. It's the black hole in front of the exam copy. Our brain is not responding. It is when we meet in front of an assembly to make a speech, and no more words come out of our mouth. It is also the child, who no longer says anything, suddenly calms down, no longer responds. The famous scene in the stores where the child has a crisis, probably a stress discharge, which rolls over and screams. Where the parent uses this technique so effective. Leave him alone and pretend to leave. What happens? The stress is so intense that the child freezes. He stops screaming, does not move. Has he calmed down? Not really, he cut himself. From the outside, it seems an effective solution. If you look more closely, the consequences for the child are not really positive. The cerebral tonsil remains in alarm, high cortisol levels have possible repercussions on the brain, not to mention the emotional reservoir emptied of a blow and the brutal break of attachments. It is also the child who becomes all soft, who lets himself slide on the ground. You have the impression that he does it on purpose, that he laughs at you. You want to take him somewhere, and he gets heavy and lets himself down. It's painful, even unbearable, and yet there is nothing he can do about it. It is sometimes difficult to understand our reactions and those of our children. Many of these need to be re-examined in light of the mechanisms of stress. If my child's reaction is due to stress, he absolutely cannot control it. It's a reflex. In this circuit, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of our reasoning, is short-circuited. It is therefore necessary to lower the level of stress in order to calm the situation. To do this, it is necessary to work on yourself and train on stress management tools. It is also important to consider stresses. Stresses. If there are specific triggers at a moment T, like a sudden noise, a dispute, surprise, fear, or whatever, there is also a whole environment that influences our ability to respond. Everything that deprives us of our freedom, all constraints, generates stress, illnesses, pains, fatigue, money problems, family or couple difficulties, time constraints, etc. Our history also influences our ability to respond and adapt. What response did we receive to our needs? Could we express our emotions? How did we handle our stress? Our children also have their share of stress. Some factors are common between adults and children, and others more specific. Unmet physiological needs, lack of freedom, unbalanced diet, school life, broken bonds, hormones, lack of movement. Overall, when we lack power over events, our stress levels increase. Our emotional reservoir is emptied, and we will have trouble coping with the small worries of everyday life. But then why do some say they need stress to move forward? Stress can still be a stimulant. Despite everything, stress has a positive function. Basically, it is a mechanism that ensures our survival. So it is useful. When a new element occurs, our cerebral amygdala activates. Our body prepares to react. It takes on cortisol and adrenaline. The heart accelerates. The muscles stretch. Our pupils dilate. This tension can improve our skills, make us more effective. It gives us the energy to adapt. This is how, under stress, a sportsman can surpass himself, an actor can achieve an exemplary performance. For this tension to be a source of surpassing oneself and not of distress, it is important to regain power over events. Use stress to his advantage, control it as a force. This is not always the case, and whatever our experience of this stress, it will cause a real fatigue of the body that should not be neglected. For stress to be a stimulant, we need to feel powerful and secure, firmly anchored. This requires work on ourselves and our environmental stresses. Being aware of our stresses allows us to take stock, realize the pressure we have been under, and sort through to regain power. What can I eliminate or reduce as stresses? How can I accept those I can't change? Stress is part of our lives. It is omnipresent for us and for our children. The consequences of the fight-flight response. The cerebral tonsil reacts to the danger, and the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system, which releases the adrenaline hormone. Thus, the adrenal cortex located above the kidneys discharges the adrenaline into the bloodstream and also discharges the cortisol into the COPS. Cortisol helps the body balance and use carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that will be used by the body to fight the danger. It also causes metabolic changes that help the body manage stress. As a result, the body reacts suddenly and changes state. The fight or flight reaction is associated with the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. The chain reaction caused by the fight or flight can cause the following physical effects. In the cardiac system, there are physiological effects: increased heart rate, dilation of the coronary blood vessels. This results in increased blood flow and increased availability of oxygen and energy to the heart. At the level of blood circulation, there is the dilation of the blood vessels at the surface of the muscles and the constriction of the blood vessels used for digestion. This results in increased availability of oxygen for skeletal muscles and transfer of blood to skeletal muscles and brain. In the lungs, bronchi dilate and the breathing rate is increased. This results in increased availability of oxygen in the blood. The skin becomes pale or red as blood circulation decreases, resulting in increased blood flow to the muscles and away from non-essential parts of the body, such as the periphery. In the liver, there is an increase in the conversion of glycogen to glucose, which increases the availability of glucose in skeletal muscles and brain cells. In the eyes, we have the dilation of the pupils. This allows more light so that the visual acuity is improved to scan the surroundings in case of leakage. As mentioned above, the organs essential to combat or flight are modified to accommodate the action to be taken in case of danger. In the eyes, we have the dilation of the pupil. In the mouth, there is a lack of saliva. In the skin, perspiration is activated. The heart accelerates. Breathing in the lungs is accelerated, short and shallow. In the stomach, digestion slows down or stops. Muscles contract. Others are tense, and you can have tremors. Released cortisol will unfortunately inhibit the immune system, which weakens the general state of health. The side effects of stress are migraines, depression, stomach burns, insomnia, breathing disorders, loss of immunity, heart complications, high blood sugar, hypertension, stomach upset, infertility, muscle pain, sexual disorders, erectile dysfunction, and irregular menstrual or amenorrhea. Apart from these physiological ravages caused by cortisol that is released as a result of danger to the human body, there are still more serious ones resulting in the lack of generalized immunity. Cortisol is a stress hormone to use our resources and consume our energy reserves. This hormone is linked to blood pressure and the immune system. It is during this phase that we can tend to the consumption of calming or stimulating products and eating disorders. The interactions between the central nervous system, stress, and immune system are better known. In particular, the role of cytokines on cells and as agents of liaison and mediation between the two systems. Stress causes the body to release pro-inflammatory cytokines, immune factors that initiate responses against infections. Although cytokine release is a desired and normally beneficial response, excess cytokines can lead to cytokine-associated toxicity. When the body produces these cytokines over long periods of time, for example, because of chronic stress, all kinds of bad things can happen in the body. Stress strikes man physically, emotionally, mentally, and impairs his behavior and makes him vulnerable to all kinds of diseases. The most common physical symptoms of stress are sweat, tremors, dizziness, increased heart rate, tension, pain such as headaches, muscle aches, joint aches, and lack of sleep. Health risks include cardiovascular disease. The main emotional symptoms of stress are irritability, anxiety, fatigue, and depression. The health risks are burnout, and depression. The most important mental symptoms of stress are too much thinking, constant anxiety, chronic pessimism, and difficulties with concentration and decision-making. The main behavioral symptoms of stress are the tendency to zapping or excessive exhaustion and being overwhelmed permanently, withdrawal, aggression, and isolation. The health risks are addictions to tobacco, coffee, alcohol, drugs. What are the tips for managing your stress? Enjoy a good night's sleep. A restless sleep rarely foreshadows an excellent day. Conversely, a good night's sleep can contribute to a feeling of invincibility. While fatigue generally increases adrenaline levels, making it more vulnerable to stress, rest improves productivity. Adequate sleep is essential to performance and facilitates stress management. Exercise. Physical activity is very beneficial for mental health. When stressed, exercise helps channel adrenaline released into the body. I often perform better in training when stressed. In addition, physical activity releases serotonin and endorphin, which contributes to a sense of well-being. Doing cardio is great, but even less intense activity, such as walking, can help. Meditate. Meditation has become increasingly popular in recent years. People use it not only to reduce stress, but also to focus and even increase their performance. Meditation exercises you to free your mind from the ideas of the past and the worries of the future, to focus on the present moment, as on your breath. It can clarify your thoughts and reduce your stress. Take control. Stress is often accompanied by a feeling of lack of control, of powerlessness. Finding a way to exercise some control over the situation can help, but it is not always possible. You may not be in control of deadlines at work, or the fact that your young person is driving your car for the first time. In these cases, find other aspects of your life that you can control. By doing so, you will have confidence in your ability to manage challenges and maintain a positive attitude. Smile and laugh. Laughter is always good. The body releases endorphins, as with physical activity. Laughter also reduces anxiety. Just smiling is beneficial. Even when forced, it can cause positive emotions in a stressful situation. Socialize. When things go wrong, it is reassuring to know that this is normal. This comfort can be regained by talking to people about different aspects of life. Spending time with some people, even virtually, can contribute to your happiness, and a familiar voice can stimulate the secretion of oxytocin, the hormone of love. Modern epigenetic science and quantum mechanics show us how these above-mentioned tricks work very well, because our perception of our environment is responsible for our diseases and our well-being. While classical genetic theories condemned us to be victims of family genetic disorders, epigenetics and quantum mechanics confirm the opposite. What is epigenetics? Let's start by defining the difference between genetics and epigenetics, because it's a new revolution in biology. Most of us have been programmed with this belief in genetic control, which means that basically we're controlled by genes, and genes are going to determine our characters and traits. We teach people that the genes we have, it comes from your family, that you didn't choose them, and that if you don't like the traits you have, you can't change them, and also you're told that genes activate and deactivate themselves, which means they control you. The result is that you are a victim of your heredity. No matter what happens, if there is cancer in the family, I will have cancer. If there are heart problems, I will have heart problems. Because he blames all this on the genes, it's called genetic control. However, a science called epigenetics has been demonstrated in recent decades. Epigenetics is a science that studies the influence of the environment on the expression of genes, the inheritance of traits, changes in information that are not carried by genes. How was epigenetics discovered? Taking genetically identical stem cells and putting them in 3 different cell culture boxes found completely different organs. Indeed, stem cells are called undifferentiated cells capable of self-renewal, infinite multiplication and differentiation into specialized cells. These are sort of the mother cells of all the other cells. At the very beginning of life, they allow the complete development of a human being. Then throughout life, they allow as a natural reserve to replenish our stocks of specialized cells. They play a central role in the development of organisms, as well as in the maintenance of their integrity throughout life. Every tissue and every organ of the human body consists of separate cells. Skin cells, for example, are different from those of the heart. It is therefore almost impossible to transfer a cell from one tissue or organ to another. However, all cells have one thing in common. They all come from a single cell source. Early in the development of the organism, these cells can become any type of tissue or organ. That is, they are not yet specialized. These original cells are called stem cells. Stem cells have 2 important characteristics that differentiate them from other cell types. First of all, as we said earlier, not all stem cells are specialized and renew for long periods by cell division under the supervision of the brain, which sends necessary ingredients or hormones into the blood. Blood is the culture medium necessary for cell division. Then, when these stem cells receive biochemical signals, they can differentiate. That means they can divide and become cells that have special functions, such as respiratory cells, heart muscles, or pancreatic cells that produce insulin, etc. Stem cells have 3 forms: embryonic stem cells, embryonic germ cells, and adult stem cells. Embryonic stem cells come from embryos. Embryonic germ cells come from testicles and ovaries, and adult stem cells come from the bone marrow. Scientists work mainly with embryonic stem cells and adult stem cells. Differentiation is the process by which stem cells can become a particular type of cells. Differentiation begins when stem cells are exposed to certain biochemical signals, either physiological or experimental. Biochemical signals sent to different parts of the body induce stem cells to transform into cells of the type specifically required at that location. All stem cells have the ability to differentiate, but to varying degrees. Totipotent stem cells can become any cell in the human body. Pluripotent stem cells can become almost any cell in the human body, but are unable to become placental cells necessary for the development of the fetus in the human uterus. Multipotent stem cells can only become a certain type of cell, such as blood cells. How is stress the main cause of the resurgence of diseases around the world, and how does stress change cell differentiation? Scientists now believe and confirm through experiments that certain types of adult stem cells can evolve and become cells of another tissue if the conditions are right. By changing the environment of the cell culture medium, or the fluid in which the cells grow, knowing that the culture medium is the laboratory version of the blood, so that the cells live in an environment similar to the blood. And so by making 3 different boxes, also called Petri dishes, with 3 different culture media, 3 different environments, but all the cells being genetically identical, and therefore in a box with environment A and culture medium A, the cells created muscle. In the second box again, with genetically identical cells, but in a B culture medium, they created bone. In the third box, all cells were genetically identical, but in a different environment, they created fat cells. So researchers have learned that genes control life. But research shows that genes don't control what they become. It's the environment that controls what they become. The bone, muscle, and fat that resulted from the same stem cell was not gene-based, but was based on the environment in which the cells were growing. So the culture medium and the environment control genetics. The human being is, moreover, made of 50,000 billion cells, which means that the body is a bit like a petri dish made of skin. Inside there are 50 trillion cells with the original culture medium, which is blood. The chemical composition of the blood, or the chemical composition of the culture medium, makes no difference. If cells are in a plastic box, it remains controlled by the environment in the plastic box. Considering the culture medium in your body, your brain is the chemist who creates your culture medium with the right chemical composition. What kind of chemical composition should the brain or the body chemist put in its culture medium, in other words, in the blood? The most incredible answer is, what is the image of everything in your mind? Is it an image of health and happiness, or an image of fear or weakness? No matter what image you think, it's going to turn into chemistry, because the brain is going to align with the image. So an image of love in your brain will create a different chemistry in your blood, compared to an image of fear. For example, when you're in love, your brain will release things like dopamine, which is the pleasure of love, oxytocin, which is the hormone of love, trust and conjugal and social bond, the hormone that will make you more attractive, so your partner will stay with you. The chemistry of love goes hand in hand with growth hormones, and when you're in love, you have the best nutrition, the best growth. And that's when people are going to tell you that you can see they're in love. They're so sparkly, they are healthy. That's the chemistry of love. But the chemistry of fear is completely different. Dr. Bruce Lipton, the renowned epigeneticist, in his book, The Biology of Beliefs, tells us that fear, by creating stress, will stop your growth, because the goal is to protect you from outside dangers. Whereas you should grow up every day, because we lose millions of cells that die every second. We have 50 trillion cells, but every second there are millions dying. When there are cells dying, stem cells will find them replacements, so the question becomes, do you have stem cells? Genes don't make decisions. Genes are connected to the environment and adjust to align with the environment image. Here comes the notions of quantum physics. To define quantum physics in a few words, we can say that it strives to understand the infinitely small. His main discovery is the finding that all matter has a corpuscular and undulating structure. So all matter is a wave, and all is vibratory. Even what we thought was solid, tangible, hard like matter, has aspects of a wave. Quantum mechanics is a branch of modern physics that describes the behavior of matter at the atomic scale. It demonstrates precisely that all physical objects can sometimes have wave properties and sometimes corpuscle properties. This quantum physics has demonstrated precisely that the observer influences or disturbs the observed object. Consider an electron, for example the electron of a hydrogen atom, which, before measuring, is delocalized. After measuring its position, the electron is perfectly localized. This location is one of the positions of the delocalized electron. In the analogy of the ball, that would be mostly on the desk, but also on the ground. If we measure the position of this ball, after measuring the ball will be located, either on the desk or on the ground. This discovery of quantum physics is very important because it clarifies that we see the world differently according to the image that is in our consciousness. We react differently to an event. Is it a harmless image, or is it an image of fear, or an image of love, or an image of loneliness? Regardless of the image, the hormones and secretions of the brain will always align with this image. This explains the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. The placebo and nocebo effects are the effects of positive and negative patient expectations, respectively, regarding their health status. Placebo effects have beneficial effects, and nocebo effects have harmful and dangerous effects. So my body suddenly becomes a complement that will align with my thoughts. If I think I'm weak and I'm going to get sick, then the body will say, okay, then we get sick, because we're open now. But if you're there, convinced that you're absolutely not going to get the flu, you can go to work and do your life. You're not going to get the flu. In conclusion, we are all, without exception, responsible for all that happens to us, thanks to or because of our own thoughts and our surroundings, through the powerful and universal laws of attraction. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to press the like, share and subscribe button to our channel, and ring the bell to be notified for new videos available. To the next video.